This meeting is being recorded.
Christopher, it looks like you're also in as an attendee, I'm afraid. Okay, thank you.
First I'm late, then I'm double dialed in. You almost think I'm anxious to be here.
Appreciate you being here. Let's see, I'm rescuing folks from the attendee pool.
I'm not quite sure where I ended up, but I'm in.
Hello.
We begun. I'm in the car. I'm not driving, but I'm gonna keep the phone off to keep you all from getting seasick. The video off.
Appreciate it. And thank you for being here. We are getting started. I think we've successfully rescued folks from the attendee pool. And so this is officially a webinar. We are live. So hello to everybody who is tuned in. And with that, I'm actually going to turn it over to the chair if you want to officially call the meeting to order or wait a couple of minutes for some more folks to join. It's up to you.
Well, it's a normal thing for me. I thought I had the land declaration in my computer, but I think maybe I just printed it off last time, and it doesn't look like the chat continues over. Oh no, I remember what I did last time. I pulled it up in Word. Oh, wait, that might work.
Also providing here.
No, that doesn't work. Shoot. Okay.
Chair Chalmanek, if you look in the chat, we've also provided it there.
Okay, now I just got to get out of here. I will be ready to go in a minute, folks. I apologize.
I think we're expecting a couple more members to be joining us today.
Okay.
I hop on the ASPCA just to meet with you, so I'm excited. I hope you know you bumped the ASPCA off my chart. I never hang up on them.
Feeling very special. For the public that is tuning in, the implementation board, to my understanding, took action yesterday to pivot this meeting from meeting for an hour to 2 hours. So this meeting is going until 5 o'clock today. And we've already begun recording. So the full conversation is being recorded and will be posted tomorrow morning.
Okay. If I pull this over here, I can read it up here. I don't understand why it's not printing. Okay. Well, I'm ready if let's see, let me just take a quick peek here and see who we all have. Ben, Juanita, Okisha. Okay. Let me get to a larger view here. Oh, let me get that out of there. Okay, do we want to just proceed in?
Sounds great, Chair. Feel free to call the meeting to order.
Okay. It is 3:08. We're a little late, but I will call the committee meeting to order, the 5-year plan review committee. Can we have a roll call of the members who are here? And obviously I'm here. So Let's
Happy to.
see. Okay, yeah, could you handle that? Thanks.
Absolutely. Board Member Ross,
Present.
Board Member Spotted Up,
Here.
Board Member Carvalho,
Here.
Board Member Merritt's,
Honk if you're there.
we see you here but did not hear you. We'll circle back. Board Member Brandon.
Here.
Thank you. Board Member Reddy. We think we got a visual wave.
Present. Yes, sir.
Thank you. Board Member Chalmanack.
And I'm here.
Wonderful. And circling back to Board Member Merritt's, are you able to unmute or indicate in the chat or wave?
If you're speaking to me, I'm here. Sorry, Alexis.
Thank you for being here.
I
Passing back to the chair.
wasn't sure if he needed to get off mute or to get off lane control. He's in his car sitting. He's not driving today. So we'll begin with the land acknowledgement, and we acknowledge that King County is located on the unceded traditional land of the Coast Salish people. We honor this land and its people, past, present, and we are committed. When the screen comes back on, I'm sorry. We are committed to directing and to direct funding and resources to organizations led by and in support of Native and Indigenous people. So with that, we will begin our review. I believe we have a couple of items that we want to go over that were on the agenda for today. I think the one is the severe weather shelter, one is wage equity, and the other is trainings. Is that right?
That is correct, Chair. Those are some of the revisions that we're going to be taking up today for consideration and conversation.
Okay. So also, if you have not had a chance to go over it, please definitely go over the memo with the consolidated comments by a number of people, plus also the raw comments that we've received from a large number of individuals as well. And then there are some policy issues, major new issues. There are some technical revisions as well within that. So Alexis, I'm going to let you lead us through that.
Thank you so much. And thank you all for coming online today to be really considering these revisions and talking through them. For the record, my name is Alexis Mercedes Rink. I'm the Director of Sub-Regional Planning and have been supporting the process of getting the 5-year plan over the finish line. Today, we are bringing forward for consideration a series of proposed revisions and a scoped in view for a few select key policy areas for today's conversation. I'm going to be sharing my screen and just do a quick grounding of the purpose of this subcommittee for the general public and provide some key updates. So the core task of this subcommittee is really to be reviewing recommendations on the revisions to the 5-year plan. We've prepared a recommendation memo, which is available to the public and has been posted on the website and also now has been circulated to a 500-person listserv, so that the recommendation memo is out there in the universe for the purposes of transparency. The core role of this subcommittee is to be working through proposed revisions and getting a plan in a place where there's a recommended version to bring to the full implementation board for a vote. This subcommittee is meeting on a weekly basis. Please note there has been a time change, namely an extension. So these meetings were running for just an hour previously from 3 to 4, and there has been an extension to extend them from 3 to 5 to allow for sufficient time to take up key policy matters. The process looks like this, and now we are in this lovely, we've moved along on the timeline since the beginning. Now the revision recommendation memo has been transmitted. We went through CEO review and the memo is out for just as publicly posted, and the board has received it. And so now it's the role of this subcommittee to be deliberating the various areas and developing a recommended version to go to the April meeting before the full board. By way of just a quick orientation to the recommendation memo, it's organized in 6 parts with an executive summary, background, synthesis of the survey findings, as we received 640 survey responses. In the 4th area, there's summarized feedback from key stakeholder groups, namely folks with lived experience, government partners, provider partners, philanthropy, and so on. And then section 5 is a table that includes a slate of proposed revisions to the plan, really based on all of the feedback that we had gleaned and pulled together from survey findings to government partners, providers, lived experience, and so on. And then the final section is a series of attachments that include a number of letters from jurisdictions, from philanthropy, from providers specifically, from coalitions of providers, and also want to voice that while it was not included in the packet, that we are continuing to receive feedback. And there was a letter that was transmitted from the Seattle Coalition on Homelessness. The board should have received that as well, and we'll make sure that's posted. But that letter is not received in time just to include in the memo, but we definitely want to uplift that it was received and will be posted. So the 5th section, there we go, is a table of proposed revisions. We have about over 70 draft proposed revisions to the plan. And the nature of these proposed revisions vary. We have 3 types of proposed revisions. There's the first area, which is kind of a new strategy. So something that was elevated throughout all the feedback that really denotes a distinct new strategy to be included in the plan. We then have substantive policy change. This is related to any type of change to the plan that has a budgetary impact or a just operational impact if we were to incorporate. And then the third area is what we would call a technical revision. Many of these technical revisions are related to adding additional data, clarifying content, more background and detail, just to further clarify the intent of what a given strategy area may include. So that's a quick way to just describe the nature of the proposed revisions as they fall into these 3 buckets. This subcommittee has a schedule of policy changes they're going to be taking up, and so tried to segment out over the next couple of weeks as this group meets, and wanted to balance it as well as we want to make sure that we're covering all the areas and have significant time to take up substantive policy matters and fully discuss. So we did section this out in such a way. So today's notable policy topics, as the chair described, we have the policy changes related to severe weather, wage equity trainings. Diversion is also included here. That's what we're going to be taking up today. Next week, you all will be taking up some of the changes related to the Medicaid or foundational community support strategy, youth young adult strategy, family strategy, and the changes there. The following week is when we're really going to be taking up the modeled funding options. There was a pretty explicit call from partners as well as from the governing committee to develop some kind of mock-up scenarios around levels of funding. So increased funding by 10% versus 50%. What is kind of the slice of the pie look like? And then also taking up THVs and emergency housing in that conversation as well, and some of the policy changes related to sub-regional implementation plans. The following week is really focused on goal 8, as that's a new goal area that has been put forward. And actually, since we've been talking with some of our partners about the addition of this goal area, there's been a lot of positive energy around including this. Positive energy as we're looking at a goal 8, which would include how the public could see themselves and how the public can contribute to addressing homelessness in our region. And so taking up that area of the plan while also budgeting, this being a meeting that is kind of budgeted time for additional topics to come forward, or allows for time for anything that maybe has not been fully addressed in the first 3 weeks to be taken up. And then for the meeting on the 6th, there is no scheduled topics. It's really budgeted flex time to ensure that we arrive at a finalized recommended version for April 12th. I'm going to pause here on this piece just around the schedule. I have some additional, before going into some of the pieces of feedback that we've gotten from governing committee staff and other stakeholders since we last met. Are there any questions that the subcommittee has on the schedule or the memo at this time?
Do any of you have questions on that, or should we move ahead?
I have a question, John,
okay.
okay?
Ben, yes.
So these, the memo was great. It was really well written and comprehensive and fair. I really appreciate the work that went into gathering that feedback, as well as the work that went into doing the synthesis. You know, the memo kind of has two sections, right? A bunch of it up front is really sort of general commentary on the structure of the plan. And then there was a bunch of specific changes that were listed, many specific changes. This schedule appears to be focused on, you know, a bucketed approach to those specific changes. But I'd like to know, will we also be looking at the structure of the plan and the some of the higher level issues, such as, you know, the lack of an overarching objective to the plan, the lack of financial forecasts and metrics, the lack of clear operational metrics, and such things like that?
Appreciate you raising that, board member. As one of the updates I wanted to bring forward today was specifically related to this. So per the feedback from governing committee staff, so folks can remember a couple weeks ago when the governing committee had met, there was a request by the committee to ensure that we were keeping a connection and engaging that body in this process. And so we have scheduled this out such that we are meeting with governing committee staff on these matters as well and gleaning their feedback. So I wanted to bring forward some updates from our session this morning, where they did really flag specifically the structural changes and wanting to work through some of those pieces, namely on how the plan is structured and some of the pieces related to embedded policy decisions as well. Paired with that is some of the pieces around clarifying year one actions and some system mapping. So happy to carve out some time today if that is of interest to further tag onto some of these areas, but also want to name that we did receive this feedback from governing committee staff today, and we're working on how we embed that into some of the proposed revisions here. Your read of this is right, where the schedule is really related to some of these other really substantive policy topics. But this has been on our radar, and we'd like to bring forward a revised matrix that includes changes, especially denoting structural ones. And want to also leave the door open that in many ways the matrix of proposed changes is a starting place. As we know that more things may come up, we are able to add to that list.
Okay, are there other questions? Paula, Okisha, Juanita, Chris?
Sorry,
Ben,
John, I just want to clarify one thing with Alexis's response. So Alexis, when will we be discussing those flag structural changes and listing them out for discussion?
We'd like to work a little bit on the staff level with the other governing committee partners, governing committee staff partners, to clarify that piece. And so ideally we were going to be huddling again, this really coming more so forward for a significant conversation across the caucuses this morning. So wanting to take a little bit of time. I imagine if I was to estimate as staff, we'd be taking this up potentially on the 23rd, but wanting to incorporate into the schedule. But this is a newer emerging piece, but definitely want to bring before you all.
Thank
and
you.
I also I missed Simha. So Simha, do you have an item?
No, this is great. Thank you.
Okay. I guess let me just ask this, because I do want to get into the substance of this, but we have a little more time. When will we see the next rewrite of the plan, so that it takes all of these 70 items into play, it takes the structural items into play, the things that you're talking about with the governing committee staff? When do you think that would be available? Because I think it's probably the next big step in this process. It's something that we as IB board members are going to want to see, governing board members, and quite frankly, the general public and those who work in this system.
Absolutely. Fantastic question. Thank you. So staff on our side, we're already working on drafting up the appropriate language that would be tied to each of the amendment areas, and really looking towards the end of this month, really before the end of this month, before the end of this month to get our revised version out the door for some consideration. But on a rolling basis, we're drafting the revision language and trying to figure out what the appropriate kind of rollout schedule of that looks like, whether it's a full document or in pieces. But we are working on over here on staff to make sure that we're writing up that language as we go.
All right, Paula, do you have a question as well? I see in the chat here that you've.
I do not. I was in the
Okay.
I was in the other room, so I asked to come over. That was it.
Okay. Okay. And Chris, let's see. Okay. Chris, did you have something? I'm sorry.
No, I just needed to excuse myself for a moment. I'll be right back.
Okay, perfect. All
John,
right, let's.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, go ahead, Sima.
I did have one quick question.
Sure.
Alexis, as you move forward in rewriting the draft, are there sections that you, if you feel like they're reasonably complete, that we can view as you go along? So, example, whether there's an overarching sort of like an introduction or like even the executive summary, right? Like that doesn't get into very specifics, but like at least gives us an overarching sense of structure. Basically, are there pieces you can release along the way as you go?
Yeah, I think we can work on some of the pieces, and in truth, some of the complicating factor here is if we are looking at a major kind of structural change that does influence dramatically how we'd be able to roll out. And so I do want to be transparent about that piece, but taking seriously how we can roll out in pieces, what are the language changes, and we'll need to sort that out as we continue to work with governing committee staff on how we restructure.
Good point. Thank you, Alexis. Appreciate that.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Any other questions, or can we move on? Okay, I'm Alexis. Let's continue on.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And so the key topics for today are related to severe weather diversion and broadly programming. So there are no new strategies listed within this bucket, but rather a series of substantive policy changes. And so if we go into the memo specifically, these are reflected in changes 19 through 38. And so taking us to some of the changes related to severe weather specifically, we have our first one here around some technical revisions related to clarifying language, but also some substantive policy changes related to the following. So we have the incorporation of existing contracts, incorporation into existing contracts, allowances for severe weather shelter response to support standardization of severe weather. We also have a change related to supporting coordination with faith-based communities to tap into potential physical spaces for severe weather. Working in partnership with jurisdictions to identify and evaluate spaces for severe weather for cities to expand in a number of options for severe weather. Pivoting severe weather response from severe weather activation to more of a seasonal weather response rather than only in life-threatening circumstances. Enhancing our outreach contracts to be appropriately staffed during severe weather events to help folks be navigated indoors, supporting then adequate staffing, as well as looking at, let's see, I think that actually might be it on our severe weather pieces, my apologies. So just holding on that piece, those are some of the proposed revisions related to severe weather response. Want to voice that this is something we heard across a number of different stakeholder groups. Perhaps it's because we've had a particularly cold winter and we've seen a really high level of activation throughout the front end of 2023. And so with that, perhaps the best way to do this is to pause there and ask, and turn it back to you, Chair, but perhaps discussion on some of this matters related to severe weather. Chair, apologies, but you're muted.
And I think we have a couple of people who may be on for their first time with this. I kind of run this a little bit on the looser side. So rather than You know, if you have a question, if you have a comment, just please speak out. And if two people speak at once, we'll just figure it out from there. So go ahead for any of the IB members.
Thanks, John. Thanks, Alexis. I had you know, you mentioned some of that additional feedback that came in, the one that came in from the Coalition on Homelessness. I think one of their concerns was that too much of a focus on severe weather made, like, standing up and bringing back down severe weather shelters seasonally may distract resources from creating more, you know, year-round shelter. Not sure I necessarily agree with that assessment, but I would appreciate if you had any thoughts or on that concern.
Appreciate that, and of course receiving the letter after us having the full this recommendation memo, creating a complicating factor. But that is something that we have heard from some of our partners who have been in the work locally. I think this might be a good moment to uplift some of the work regionally. So there has been a trend where it begins with severe weather shelter, and then it moves to winter weather shelter, and then it moves into year-round shelter, because it turns out we just need more capacity. And so I want to honor a bit of that history that we've learned from some of our human services planners around the region, that is something that they've said. They're like, that's great. That's that is exactly our thought process that we had 10 years ago. And now we have year-round shelter, because turns out that's exactly what we really needed. And so I think we're trying to thread the needle also between, we have a number of providers that are engaged in severe weather response and are seeing folks in crisis not able to access or reliably access a severe weather shelter. And currently with this severe weather response that we have, where it's like a light switch, it's off again, it's on again, and we have a lot of instances where folks will show up to a severe weather shelter thinking that it's open, only to be turned away because it technically doesn't meet the activation threshold anymore. And that being a challenging circumstance when we can't create reliability in the system to support our unhoused neighbors that are in challenging weather conditions. And so that's kind of the two sides of the coin that we see in this. We've heard from, again, some provider partners wanting to look towards more seasonal weather activation, but then similarly, how can we learn from history and identifying that there's just a need for more spaces indoors? I hope that's helpful.
It is. Thank you, Alexis.
Others who'd like to comment, just again, hop in. Paula, Chris, Juanita.
I'll say
Keisha,
for
great.
can you ask for me?
Yes.
Okay, so for me, and I am a little frustrated, but I'm gonna show you the best way I know how. I don't. It's not, because like a lot of people have already stated, it's not necessarily like a new thing. We've all been knowing this is something that's needed, that's brought up, meeting after meeting, year after year. It's not so much that we don't know that that's not what we need. It's about how they are ran, how, like, from the screening process to the intake or the training or whatever is the way that it's brought or like ran. So I think that, like, us all knowing and being on the same page about what the need is for unsheltered neighbors, it's not so much as what's needed, what's not needed. We already know that. It's how we getting people in and keeping them in, and really the ability to, they trust us, they connect. You know, how we're utilizing the voices of what they're asking for, what they're needing, what's not put in place for them to do what they need to do and get off their feet. What don't they have? You know, we're working towards the shelters, yes, and there's already some in place. The ones that are in place, we don't need to get rid of them. We need to better them. There needs to be a different protocol because things are not working. So if someone says, I'd rather not be in the shelter, there's something wrong there. And I don't think that's on the unsheltered people. That's on the shelter. What are you doing that's wrong? Or what's so horrible about you where you have people on the street saying they don't want to be there? I think that's what we're missing, is that it's not whether or not things are there. Of course, we want them there, but if people have the same notation about what a shelter is all across the nation, that says something about the people in those spaces in our system, and what the system and how they're I don't say gaslighting, but holding that money. If you're saying, "Oh, do it this way, do it this way," if you're going to ask for my funding, there's a problem there. We got workers that have the experience and some that don't, and they got volunteers, and they know they're working under your dollar, under your grant, under the way you want things done, under your procedures. They don't want to lose their job because they're only a check away from being homeless themselves again. They're going to follow protocol, but if that protocol doesn't serve the people on the streets, then we're not doing anything but going in circles. And the 5-year plan becomes the 10-year plan, and we're talking about the same things over. It's not about what we have and don't have. It's about the way we're doing it.
Okisha, could you help me? Could you help me understand what are tangible things that shelters might do wrong that push people back out, even when the weather is severe? Is it a safety issue? Is it?
I think it's all around, from
Okay.
safety to just the attitude, the ways they're treated, the value and validity, like just simple things, even like, oh, like they're nothing. Like, come on. I have been homeless and I refused to go to a shelter from here. I didn't step foot in one, but I heard the stories, and that was enough to keep me out. Those they listen, max, I do one thing wrong, I'm thrown out. They're sitting me next to this person who has extreme mental issues, and like it's just the way that everyone should not be packed in like sardines. There needs to be some kind of really supportive nature there. Bring people in that are trained to help all kinds of individuals, whether it's weekly, daily, not the people are too focused on, being by 5. Oh, you can't come into this time. Excuse my language, but the time they're getting there, who are you bringing in that can help aid and truly nourish and provide and support the people that they're supposedly serving? We have all these different shower. I went to the Oakland conference. They have like little shower vans, and we have our Medicaid van out here and things like that. Bring these people in weekly to check on them and make sure they're okay, and make sure there's a clean bathroom, and make sure there's clean towels, and that the floor is mopped, and they have a good amount of potential food coming in. Like, there's different ways to hold different shelters. It doesn't have to just be a place where people come and sleep. Provide more. Bring more. Use that money in different ways. Be creative with how we run shelters. And maybe we'd have more success rates and data, all this data that everybody wants. It'll be a bit more beneficial if it's used in the right way. People are wanting to come to shelters to get the help and get resources. While they're waiting for permanent housing, they can be still getting the help they need while they're in shelters. And if you have procedures in place, explain to them, hey, this is why we're doing it this way. It's not to be, any kind of way, because some people are so traumatized, they just feel like you're imprisoned and that you're just treating them like any old thing. If you explain to them, hey, this is why, people are going to say yes regardless to get inside, but this is why we have these rules to protect you. It's not to be rude, not to treat you like animals, etc. So that's the way I'm trying to get you guys inside of the way that I'm thinking. There's just different creative ways to take on these responsibilities, and it's our responsibility. We can't get on here for 2 hours and talk in circles about the same thing.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Good. Okisha, I'm not going to excuse you for your language. I'm going to thank you for it because it shows your passion for the issue. And I think that really helps. That helps some of us who have not experienced homelessness. So I very much appreciate it. Others who would like to speak to this issue from the board, just go ahead. Paula, Juanita, Ben, Chris, Simha, you may have already been in on this.
Yeah, I'm trying to keep myself from talking. Too
Okay.
much, but,
Yeah, go ahead,
I'd
Ben.
love to hear what Simba has to say, but I'll just I just want to react to what Akeisha was saying, which I think really ties back to a lot of the structural and strategic elements of the plan. You know, what a couple of things that I heard Akeisha say that really stuck with me is that, you know, if our shelters aren't drawing people in, then something is wrong with the shelter. And I think that's just a message that we need to have front and center in the plan, right? The plan has to have an element for how do we make our shelters better? If we're building new shelters, how do we make them the best shelters possible such that they are pulling people in and we never have to do a push to get somebody to go into a shelter, because living outside is really terrible. It shouldn't be hard for us to create shelters that are better than living outside. But underpinning that statement, I believe, is a core belief, and I don't want to put words in Akeisha's mouth, but I believe there's a core belief that we need to have enough shelters. Yesterday, we heard that there were 5 shelter beds available across the system, which is completely unacceptable. So if I think back to this, one of the structural elements in the plan that we need to put in place is a very, very clear mandate to try to create as many high quality shelter options as quickly as possible. And that those shelter options have to be able to scale with the seasons. You know, we understand obviously that there's more need in the winter, but that the ebb and flow will be less if we have enough shelters for year round, because there's not more I don't know what the data shows. I suppose there's not more homeless people in the winter. It's just that they want to come inside more in the winter. But if we build enough shelters to accommodate everybody who's outside, the surge is required in the cold months should be less. And so I think if we step back and think about what are the implications for the plan, we should make sure that we're centering the need to create the shelter capacity that is needed right now. You know, our own PIC count showed that there was between 7,000 and 8,000 people who are unsheltered.
So
that's how many we need.
Ben,
Yep.
excuse me, I'm going to interrupt. I'm having an issue here and I'm going to have to step away. So if we can keep the discussion going, I'll let you know when I'm back. Okay.
Okay. I'm sure. I think we can behave while you're away, John. But I would just like to I'll close by saying there's, I think, 3 things that come out of it. One is we need to center the need for enough shelters. 2, we need to have very, very clear minimum standards for what those shelters look like so that people are choosing to go to the shelters as opposed to being outside year round. And then 3, we need to have a clear process for activating cold weather spaces that, you know, is based on the understanding that we should have largely enough going forward year round. And so I just want to thank Akeisha again for her heartfelt comments on the shelter system. That perspective is so important for us to bring front and center into this meeting.
Alexis, could you go back to the slide real quick?
So give me one moment.
Did that PowerPoint go out? I feel like I keep looking for it, but I can't find it.
Should be posted. We'll make sure I can forward to the board. Apologies.
No, it probably is in my emails.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I had for some reason thought all of them were around severe weather. But when it comes to the severe weather piece in particular, then you pointed to there were a couple things I can point to in our discussion. One you pointed to, which was the hard shutoff of severe weather spaces, and is part of the policy change this idea of like ramping down severe weather a little bit more slowly, or like severe weather plus 3 days. Is that what you were alluding to, Alexis?
We were thinking a little bit more looking to a seasonal weather type model where we would set a start date and an end date, saying like, for example, September 1st through January 31st. That's very arbitrary, but setting some dates around like this is when we have seasonal winter weather. And the other thing that I'd like to uplift is also around, we have a number of other hazardous weather conditions, as we also did a lot of addressing around severe heat as well, and even KCRJ staff doing outreach and setting up cooling canopies, and want to just uplift those were similarly dire conditions as we interface with a lot of folks who are struggling with the heat. So similarly setting some type of time frame around heat response in the summer months, as we are seeing increasingly hot and smoky summers.
Okay, so overall this sort of shift away from like discrete events to like at-risk seasonal periods. Okay, thanks. And yeah, I'll pause there. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm not sure if our chair is back, but wondering if there's any additional comments on some of the proposed revisions related to the severe weather shelter strategy. I do also want to uplift, there's a technical revision included in here that just further clarifies the role that jurisdictions currently play in addressing severe weather. Our team works a lot with. We've gotten to know a lot of emergency managers in cities, and worked with human services planners around the region to be able to understand the full network. There's a lot of severe weather shelters that are stood up that are kind of outside of our formal network, but we partner to understand, you know, how those operate. And so there is a technical revision that adds clarifying language to acknowledge that reality.
Does when you talk about severe weather outreach, does that also include like a focus on improved community communication, like, you know, whether through text pushes or like, you know, making sure all the hospitals have what they, you know, information at the ER, like a coordinated way to make sure that everybody knows where severe weather shelters are?
Yeah, that is when we were writing, that's a good clarifying point. When we were writing this section, we were thinking about specifically outreach staff having like materials on them to be able to distribute to help with folks who may choose to shelter in place. Again, as Okisha elevated, there are a number of folks who, even in hazardous weather conditions, would much rather stay in their own space with their things. So some folks choosing to shelter in place, so equipping outreach. But to your point around broad communications, I can speak currently to how we do communicate out to the broader network, knowing that there's much to be improved. We work closely with King County Office of Emergency Management. We do a pretty wide call to all of the jurisdictions to better understand what they may be standing up. As a number of jurisdictions will set up warming centers as well. And in those warming centers, as well as looking at additional severe weather shelters that are stood up. And we did a lot of that blog post. That blog post is then shared through King County Office of Emergency Management, and they bump through their networks. We collaborate with King County Library System to make sure that their library staff are aware of the resources. As we know, a number of folks will stay at libraries during the daytime in cold weather conditions. And so when it comes closing time, library staff being equipped with knowledge of what overnight sheltering options may be available. And we do put together a flyer as well. And I know there's a geographic flyer for Seattle-based sites and a geographic flyer for South King County sites, as there's a number in South King County, and that's to equip outreach to be able to distribute. So that's a little bit about communications outreach as it stands, knowing that there's much to be improved. But as we've also noticed, when we do have this on again, off again kind of system, it becomes challenging to reliably tell people what'll be open. And so part of we won't need to have as broad communications in this kind of way if we did have more reliability in what is activated throughout a given time. I hope that's helpful.
And I saw that Juanita had written in the chat.
Apologies, I can't see the chat.
I just mentioned in our Friday meeting, Patricia stated that she was helping somebody and they went to a shelter space, and she gave the comment that they did not give them the information needed to where to go for severe weather shelter. That's what I put in the chat box.
Thank you for bringing that forward, Juanita. It's good to know. Definitely follow up and talk more. To that end, is John Chalmanek back yet?
I have a question. I live downtown, so I'm on 6th and Yesler, and we have a campsite different directions. And I just wanted to find out, because there was a fire there not long ago. And I know there was some cleanup. I think the city came by and they were helping with that. If people choose not to go to the severe weather shelters, is there just to help people who, because I always see people sleeping in the doorways because I'm in the downtown corridor. And is there availability like with a blanket or sleeping bag for that kind of outreach?
It's a great question. So we should be in a space where outreach should be able to provide some type of supplies like that for folks to stay warm. So let's follow up on that point, but that's something that outreach should be able to provide.
Thank you.
Thank you. Not sure if our chair is back, but wondering any final comments on this area before we go into our next area. We'll be looking to take action and votes towards the end of today's meeting. So we'll circle back on that. Sorry, I heard a voice.
Oh, I was just gonna say, I think it's okay to move on. I don't know if anybody else disagrees.
Appreciate that affirmation. And I think there's agreement. So we'll move forward. The next area here is around specifically taking up change. Apologies, and get our tracker up. We're going to change is around diversion specifically. One moment and I can find that. There we are. So the next slate of changes have to do with diversion. And so if we go into the memo, these are changes underneath whole area 2. And so here are, apologies. So we have some technical revisions around just clarifying the difference between diversion and prevention. We also have a substantive policy change related to providing support through coordination between agencies, providing diversion services through base building spaces. We also have a substantive policy change here that proposes changing the definition or eligibility for diversion resources that moves it from exclusive to folks currently experiencing homelessness to folks who are at imminent risk. Those are the 3 areas related to diversion policy.
Is there a slide that you could share that lists those out?
I can share my screen on the memo if that's helpful.
That would be helpful for me. Yes, thank you.
Of course. So we're looking at specifically changes 33, 34, and 35, all having to do with diversion, and I can highlight those. Any feedback or questions on these areas? These were things that we heard primarily through engaging with provider leadership and providers.
Could you summarize again just the specific change that's like what's in there now and what you're proposing to move to? I'm having a bit of a hard time following. I apologize.
Not a problem. This one's a little bit more having to do with the programming side of things. So currently within the plan, there's some stated objectives around improving diversion. Within that, we also have some objectives related to how we provide diversion training. So this is currently under within the draft plan. We have strategy 2.2, which is scale diversion to decrease inflow, and some description specifically about how diversion currently exists and how it can be, how it's being utilized in our system through regional access point and so on. The strategies within this one, so on the regular draft plan that's posted publicly, it's on page 58. It currently has initiatives related to scaling funding to, or securing funding to scale diversion resources with a goal of diverting 6% or about 1,400 households from falling into homelessness annually. To tie a through line, this is something that was also identified in the regional action framework as a key strategy. And so we, again, trying to build on previous planning efforts, that's where a lot of this diversion strategy came from. We also have an initiative here related to increasing access to diversion training to ensure best practices are followed. We have a proposed removal of the 30 to 45-day time limit to complete diversion to accommodate households that may have more complex needs, and then working with providers to include case management support for 3 to 6 months after financial assistance is provided. So those 4 things that I just read are what's currently within the 5-year plan draft. And so what we're putting forward today is 3 changes. One is a technical revision around really just adding clarifying language on diversion and the difference between diversion and prevention, but then 2 substantive policy changes that are adding 2 initiatives, one relating to supporting the coordination between agencies that provide diversion support, and then the other is changing the eligibility for diversion resources.
Is rapid rehousing considered part of diversion, or is that a separate program?
It's a separate program.
And so do you mind reminding us just what specific programs are covered under the topic of diversion? Is it rehousing people?
I can read a little bit specifically on how the section of diversion currently reads related to this. So this is currently through the centralized diversion fund.
I guess I'm asking like a really basic and foolish question. Could you explain what diversion is?
Diversion is Diversion is a short-term intervention focused on identifying immediate and safe housing arrangements and utilizing conflict resolution and mediation skills to reconnect people to their systems of supports. So it's usually not coupled with a longer-term subsidy or service intervention. It is also can have a, it's looking at a number of ways that we can ensure equitable distribution. And so we do look at how we can ensure access to regional access points. So it is focused on funding specifically.
But I also think, I think this is important just because I think when we think of diverting, we think about diverting people from the homelessness system, but they've already touched the system. We're just trying to get them out quickly. And I do think that there are other models that use the term diversion as a true preventative model. Like it's for people, like I'm seeing in 35, the difference between those experiencing to allow for those at risk. And I think that's important because not all communities use diversion as prevention, and some do. That just has not historically been our model.
Yeah, Paula, thank you for explaining that. I just I found myself a little bit confused about what this program is. To the extent that there's the opportunity to use this for prevention, I strongly support that. I think that through the COVID period, we had a national experiment with rental assistance that in King County was run extremely well. I'm referring to the program, the FRAP program. And in the buildings that my company manages, we had almost 100 people benefit from that program, and I'm sure that many of them would have become homeless otherwise. And so, to the extent that we can, start to strengthen that, it's a very, very powerful tool that really prevents people from getting into the system in the first place. Running it, getting people access to it, I understand is probably very challenging, and that's probably the point around the regional access centers, which I think is a broader question of access. But the nice thing about working with people who are currently housed is that each one of them is going to have a housing provider that is a very strong vested interest in keeping that person housed. And so we'll, probably be able to be a partner in getting assistance to the people that need it. And so to the extent that this is what I think it is, I think this will be a very effective tool for achieving our mission of reducing unsheltered homelessness.
Juanita has her hand up. Oh, Juanita, did you not want to speak anymore?
Yeah, I
Oh,
just have
sorry.
a quick question about diversion. I'm kind of not real familiar with it, but I think part of it is it for short-term rental assistance and eviction prevention, and then helping others relocate back to their communities.
So just to be clear, this is a question related to like how diversion funds can be used. Am I getting that right, Juanita?
Yeah, I was kind of a little bit that not every provider has access to that. And then with the state offices, DSHS has access to this diversion funding.
So currently it's provided through a couple of providers. There's a centralized diversion fund within the system. I believe it's currently operated through Africa Town, I believe. Yes, through Africa Town International. And really it's a funding resource specifically. And so it has a degrees of flexibility associated with it, but yeah, financial assistance. See a hand from Simha.
Yeah, sorry, I think I'm struggling with just a little bit of confusion still. In when I look at 34 and 35, right, where we were thinking about expanding diversion to include people who are at risk, like why aren't we just calling that prevention, right? Like it's, Ruby, diversion is so confusing as is. Like she's right. Like I guess why don't we just have more resources for prevention? I find it confusing. I'll put it that way.
And yeah, I mean, I also feel like we were talking about it. I feel like when I was a case manager and we had a diversion fund, like I would have to like tell my young people to go to shelter for like a day to like receive these funds. So I mean, and then I think it also gets confusing because there's also juvenile justice diversion. And when young people go through these programs, they never touch juvenile justice. But our people actually have to touch the homelessness system before they receive diversion. And so that's why I actually think like we should not at all like confuse them. Like I don't even think we should call it diversion. They're not being diverted. They're diverted out quickly, but they're not diverted from. So I think it's just confusing in general. I think this is more like it's a bigger problem just because I think it's like a really popular term right now. So I don't think that's something that we can solve. But I think that we should be really clear when we write diversion, what that definition is. It's kind of to your point about number 34, goal 2.
Yeah.
It's not prevention at all. It's just,
Like
I think it's prevention from like long-term homelessness.
Right, like why don't you, like, when you're talking about an initiative that proposes changing the definition of eligibility, like why aren't we just adding resources for prevention and like allowing flexibility for people to choose prevention, I guess.
Yeah, Paula, it sounds like you're familiar with this. What can you explain like what these funds are and like who gets to use them for the diversion piece?
Yeah, I mean, I think there are different. So I put the definition or like how they describe diversion in the chat from Africa Town. So Commerce has some for, I don't know if it's for all populations. I know OHY has some money for like diversion, but like other programs have diversion and truly use it as prevention. So like if you're at imminent risk, if you like go and see a case manager and you're like, I have an eviction notice, or you're doubled up and you're saying that like you can't stay there anymore. Like I've seen, kind of to what Juanita was saying, I've seen people request diversion funds to say like, I'm going to be homeless. Can you buy me a van so I can live in my van? Or I'm going to be homeless, but I have family in like Montana. Like, could you pay for that? So it's just meant to like divert people out of the homelessness system quickly. So they're not, to Alexis, what Alexis was saying, like they're not permanent housing solutions. They're kind of quickly, let's move you through. We'll figure out the rest while we, it's a housing first. So we'll figure it out once we ensure that you're like safe for now, and then we'll seek permanent housing. So it is meant to be like a pretty minimal amount of like funding for diversion.
So it sounds like it's basically a flexible pool of money that comes from Commerce or now comes from the RHA that service providers can tap into to, get people what they need to either move them out of homelessness really quickly or keep them out of homelessness if possible. Is that right? And it's different from rapid rehousing, which is a voucher-based program, which is generally for people who are not housed and are homeless. It's more like an intermediate term, like 3 to 12 month kind of thing. And then, in terms of like actual rental assistance, it doesn't really seem like we have a structural program for that at all right now, which, come back to my point about FRAP, like that does feel like the solution to many people's problems is helping them with rent to keep them from being homeless in the places where they currently are.
It's a little bit easier for certainly for me to see this after it's sort of written out more thoroughly. I'm still struggling a little bit, but
yeah. So I think that part of like the structural changes in the plan, could be an explanation of what the system we currently have is, or perhaps like a separate document that kind of lays that out so that it's a bit easier to understand some of the terms as well as the policy changes.
I see. Chair
Okay,
John.
I am back. Actually, I wanted to hear the discussion because I was unclear on diversion as well. So coming in just at the tail end of the discussion, still not certain that I understand, but I'm getting a feel for it. And thank you, Paula, for the explanation on that. It was very helpful.
I also just put a link in here from one of our partners. They're really focusing on youth and young adults, but they call it like homelessness prevention and diversion. So they are preventing young people from coming into touching the homelessness system, as well as diverting them out quickly. I just feel like their data on this is like pretty amazing. Like their results were like out of this world. So if people, just want some nice light reading, I actually find it like very impressive.
Okay.
I also like to just add with my experience prior, before pandemic, being a DV survivor and relocating. With this organization, I had the choice. I could not access it if accessing diversion, that no other resource would be available to me. It was almost like one or the other and you had to choose. But that was a while back. It could have changed by now.
Alexis, can you speak to that at all? Like that.
Apologies, I was taking up one other matter. Juanita, I apologize. Could you please repeat that?
Well, just my experience prior to the pandemic, being a DV survivor fleeing, I had only one option. It was like I couldn't access resources the DV was offering.
Oops, we lost you there, I think.
Yeah, didn't hear the latter part of your sentence. I'm sorry, Juanita. You weren't able to access those resources?
Oh, I'm sorry. My phone, I thought I was muted and I was really talking, but no, I just wanted to just get clarification that when accessing diversion, you're not able to access the other resources.
That's a great question.
Yeah, so in the chat, Ruby is drawing a distinction apparently between fleeing And I don't know if it's between fleeing and diversion, but could somebody explain a little more about that to me and others who might not be completely aware of these terms?
I'm happy to speak a little bit to this around just also the complexity. One of the challenges in the system, as we know, many folks that are fleeing a situation of domestic violence will access actually different types of resources. And there is a separate kind of DV system that we collaborate with, but we don't have ownership or oversight on as KCRHA. So the Coalition Ending Gender-Based Violence is one of our key partners in this work, as they oversee specifically a separate data management system when it comes to DV services, because there is an additional layer of confidentiality. And something that you'll see also represented in some of the proposed revisions in this plan is working through how we have better coordination with that system, because it is so fragmented for safety reasons, but it does present challenges exactly like what with Juanita speaking to, and being able to leverage resources from both, because there is a clear intersection, but because of the need for confidentiality and that piece around data, it does end up, the result is like then fragmentation and what kind of services folks can access if they're both fleeing and then also experiencing homelessness.
Okay. Your answer makes sense. I'm not sure that whole way of not being able to coordinate makes sense, but I think the idea, I mean, I certainly understand fleeing domestic violence and having a greater control over the access to information and those sorts of things, and keeping people safe. But somehow the two systems have got to figure out a way to work for that person who's fleeing as well as others. It just seems to me.
Yeah, the data systems don't talk to each other.
Yeah.
But we do have coordination. I know when we were offering and working with providers around emergency housing vouchers, we did work with a number of specific programs that do serve folks who are survivors. And we coordinate with the Coalition Ending Gender-Based Violence on a number of matters, also talking about the complexities of how we can change programs so they better serve survivors. But it does feel like, just from a staff perspective, it shouldn't be as challenging to coordinate on these pieces. So we are working on that.
Okay, thanks. Other comments by IB members? Not seeing any on this right now. Alexis, do you want to take us to our next technical revisions?
Yes, thank you. So we're going back up a little bit to this next area. Apologies for breezing it over. So we've talked through severe weather. We have a couple of other technical revisions. So if we go to change number 28, this is considered a more substantive policy change, as we are looking at how we can ensure that KCRHA is holding and offering trainings to support standardization of person-centered healing-based services, and really having those trainings also designed by those with lived experience. Paired with that, we have a technical revision related to just further defining what we mean when we say capacity building. There's a lot of folks that identified that capacity building is great, but what is KCRHA's definition of capacity building? And so further fleshing out within the document the work of the community capacity team. And further, there's a technical revision related to how we develop trainings that need to be done in partnership with those with lived experience. Those are kind of the pieces around capacity and training. There's also a piece here. I don't know if we want to hold on wage equity for a second. Wage equity is with regards to 31 and 32, but perhaps just taking up these changes 28 through 30. Are there any feedback on training initiatives?
Any feedback there? Again, just go ahead and speak up.
There was recently a report. There was recently a report that from the city of Seattle, wages that was done by Washington, that was written up in Real Change and a few other places, and it covered, I think, some of these points, but also the wage scale point, which I feel like is connected. And one of the issues is just the way that we our system works, where most of the jobs have been outsourced to nonprofits. The nonprofits are smaller organizations in many cases by design, and lack the resources to do their own training, and oftentimes compete with each other in a race to the bottom on wages. And so I think this really speaks to the need for a broader HR system for the authority to better support providers in things like training, onboarding, some of the performance management systems, but necessarily it will have to also include wage equity, which is so critical in this organization, right? We're talking about what I believe to be the most critical social problem that we have in our community, and the people who are doing the real work that are out there right now are being paid, far below market, and as a result, the turnover is very, very high. We see it every day, and every day our residents have case managers that turn over all the time, and I'm not an expert in this at all, but I imagine it's very difficult to build a relationship if you don't have that kind of stability in the service provider community. So I think this is another one of those things where these are all good ideas, but it needs to get brought up a level into what I think is really a HR strategy for where the authority can partner with the very large number of service providers that we have to make their workforce as effective as possible.
Other comments?
I actually had a question for
Yes,
Ben.
Simone.
I wonder if you could talk a little bit more about what you mean by providing more human resource type support for the organizations. I mean, beyond particular trainings, what might that include? Like from the KCRHA side?
The report from the University of Washington that was commissioned by the city had a couple recommendations in it, and I'm sure somebody will be able to find it faster than me and put it in the chat. But among it was like a civil service style wage scale, where there are wages that are set for certain job skills that would then keep service providers from needing to feel like they have to compete to lower their costs to be competitive. And along with that, there could be a recruiting engine that could help fill roles across service providers in a way that could help the workforce build up and be scalable. I think that's there's it's a model that we could borrow from some of the labor organizations that are around here. And then there probably could be, I think, substantial training and other resources, right? So for example, on the topic of outreach, there's 20 different service providers out there doing outreach right now. But those roles are so critical as a way of connecting people to resources. But that the systems we're dealing with are so incredibly complicated. I don't believe that anybody who's trying to do outreach on their own is ever going to be able to figure it out. They need to have a outreach manual that's going to apply to many different organizations as well. It's not just true of outreach, it's all right. Going back to what Okisha said, we should be helping to train folks in how to run a shelter with a set of minimum standards, and making sure those jobs are filled with people that are being paid living wages.
Alexis, I also wonder, I mean, I know that when Mark was hiring up their team, there was a big conversation about like what the minimum pay was, which I think makes complete sense. I think this work is hard. And I do wonder though, during the rebidding process, if that's also going to be contemplated, because it is hard as an organization to say like, we have these minimum standards that like our staff are going to make this much. But if we're not actually granting that out to our stakeholders and partners on the ground, I think that's like a big point of contention. And I do wonder if that's like potentially something that can just be written into the plan, that's going to, I would hope, be a part of the rebidding process.
Thank you for that. I can speak a little bit to that piece just around, I would point to technical revision 31, as we've been hearing across the board, especially is trying to thread the needle between like wanting to take steps towards wage equity, but also wanting to take into account organizational considerations with smaller organizations just in a different posture and position, and wanting to support in the actual implementation of it. We're on the shared goal of like, we want to be able to move in this direction to ensure that frontline staff are paid wages such that they can live in this region even still, but also wanting to ensure that we're being supportive and being able to just take into account different organizational positions. And so there is a position of wanting to incorporate into RFPs how we go about doing this, but trying to, again, thread the needle on how we can partner to make sure that implementation of equitable wages is done in such a way that it does not entirely shake everything up or cause major disruption to services. If that makes sense. Apologies if that doesn't.
Actually, can you elaborate on that more? Because I think I understand the problem, but I would like to go a layer deeper. So not all service contracts cover the entire staff. And is the part of the challenge that it can only apply to people that are directly billable to the contract? And there's the other individuals within inside the agency that can't necessarily get then wage adjustments per the RHA contract?
You've reached the bounds of my knowledge, actually, in full transparency, but can commit to getting further information.
Okay. So I've been on both sides of the table with this. I have been a receiver of the service contract dollars, and I am in a nonprofit agency now, and so and paying out the dollars and trying to be have fair and equitable wages. And it is a very complicated problem. And I'm just, as a board member and as a King County tax-paying citizen, I'm concerned that we have a huge employment base that is impacted by the RHA, and that we would not want to try to use this opportunity to fix an economic disparity that exists. And I feel like we have to, but I also feel like it is a really complicated problem that is, quite frankly, beyond the skills of a lot of people. I'm not disparaging anyone on this call or in the RHA, but this is massive economic impact study, thought process. I would get somebody that could really help get some clarity around this. And part of this is, if you are going to make contracts with service providers that say people that are part of the billable and the reimbursable on the contract must earn a certain wage, but we want to address the rest of your staff that aren't part of that contract that are going to have now an wage disparity, and we're going to now cause an entire ecosystem disruption for every one of our service providers, then we've made the life of the service providers a lot more complicated. And I'm just concerned that this is a very principled and important point, and we should be doing something to raise the wage standard, but I cannot say it strongly enough. I feel like this is a very complicated, bigger problem, and I don't know if inside the RHA, or if it's King County's Department of Economic Development, somebody needs to get involved that can actually address this, that has the skill set, because of the magnitude of it and the importance and the philosophical and pragmatic implications that go with it. I mean, it's important.
Thanks, Chris. Other comment?
Yeah, this is Juanita. I just want to
Juanita.
add to both discussions. One was regarding number 30, goal 2, done in partnership with those with lived experience. And with the economic, the financial part, and the next one, 31, is very highly complicated. Speaking with lived experience, and also because of the system that I'm currently in, it's been problematic for me in the sense where having navigation is not, there's not a lot of support in how to navigate this bigger federal system, and compared to some of the smaller systems. And because lived experience and homelessness and a wide range, my case has been domestic violence and chronic homelessness for a number of years, and safety being a huge main factor having to move and move again. So employment has been challenging because of different circumstances. So I just want to say it's been, there's a federal, when I went to the conference, there was a organization that was putting a bill forth with those with disabilities to get support and their, how important it was to have their lived experience at different tables. And it was emphasized how much good it has an impact. But some systems are not yet at that place in being helpful with their work part. I don't know if this makes sense, but it's just been very complicated for me. And because of that, it's just been kind of stressful. So I appreciate it when because people don't have that lived expertise and knows what it feels like to be in the system, they forget how important it is to do harm reduction and informed trauma care. And the organization ends up being more hurtful. And part of having support for both providers and clients and being able to make those necessary adjustments and wanting to be helpful than harming people. There's a lot of new people coming in that are not trained. So as a result, and especially coming into cultural-based programs, they've not had the experience or the training to understand some of the cultural principles that are at play. And so they end up being more hurtful. And a lot of people fall through their net and end up, it just affects the person and their whole well-being. And as a result, chronic homelessness just keeps being perpetuated. And of course, the end result is death, right? So I just seen so many that didn't have the training because of that constant fluctuation of new people coming in. So I just want to be able to express that these are very important, and I'm glad that they're being addressed in these goals, number 2, and also with the financial part, to include that also in the wages with those that have disabilities and that are in those systems at the federal and state level. Does that make sense?
Yes, Juanita, apologies. Do we still have Chair Chalmanek here? Oh, I see you, John, but you're muted.
There we go. Sorry, I just dropped the headset there right at the very end of Juanita speaking. I apologize. So I missed. Juanita, were you completed?
Yeah, I just hope I was able to articulate to everyone what I was trying to talk about, the 2 different factors.
Yes. No, I think you did well. Any other comments on these? Okay, Alexis, do we want to go on to another, or how are we doing in terms of getting through what we were planning on today?
Thank you for that. I would like to take us to the last couple of areas. Just briefly, the majority of them are technical revisions. There's one final more substantive policy piece that I want to elevate, but definitely want to do a quick run through of those last pieces and then talk about what we'd like to put forward for a vote for today, as we will be voting on some of these pieces, first starting with technical revisions and then seeing if the group is in a place where they can vote on some of the substantive policy changes.
Okay.
So taking us to the next area, which is 36, I've kind of grouped these together. So looking at 36 through 38, I think this is particularly relevant for the conversation that we just have been having, namely in this one around here. There is some technical revisions to add language acknowledging the need to maintain existing levels of services, especially as we're looking at a number of system level changes. How can we also ensure that with these changes, we're maintaining services around the region? In change number 37, being explicit to add survivors to gender-based violence and domestic violence to populations, and then also looking at how we can add explicit background detail on what evidence-based practices look like as a technical revision. That's number 38. The next tranche here with technical revisions includes also adding some further clarifying material related to standards of care and service models. So looking at defining and listing out service models such as trauma-informed care, harm reduction, shared decision-making, person-centered care. The next area is also then looking at how we can ensure, if we are looking at pivoting some models from congregate to non-congregate models, how we can support providers in that transition process. And then adding some descriptive language around how procurement processes are going to be developed, and reference to also the procurement manual. Additionally, when we look at change number 43, adding just some narrative to also the role and purview of KCRHA to set programmatic standards for a number of program types. Those are all technical revisions to add context and detail. The last area, which is a more substantive policy change, was something we heard loud and clear from engaging with our LGBTQIA, namely trans and gender nonconforming partners and community, around looking at how we can specifically explore a program type that has an emphasis on a confidential emergency housing option for trans and gender nonconforming individuals. This is something that our formal homelessness response system does not currently have, but was named as a really explicit and critical need given the nationwide trend in violence against trans people and the disproportionate rates we see trans folks experiencing homelessness. And so that is the final substantive policy change that's in the slate for today.
Okay. Are there comments from board members on any of these strategies, whether technical or substantive?
John, I don't know if maybe I'm the only one here, but I'm just having a really hard time tracking these. And I think, and I'm trying to think about why. I think maybe the issue is that we never really had a presentation of the plan in its starting point. And so it's very hard to engage on these changes. Now, I think we all did read the plan, but when at least I read the plan, I was looking more at the high level direction of the plan and some of the structure, what we're calling the structural issues. You know, things like, should we be spending $13 billion or $300 million? And so I just don't feel like I have a grasp on these issues to be able to have an opinion on them. And because I don't understand them. And also it's hard for me to get to this level of implementation detail without feeling like I'm comfortable with the overall strategy and structure behind the plan. And maybe other folks are better able to debate these particular points right now, but I'm not sure that I can really engage in them, and certainly not sure I can vote on them.
Yeah, others?
I'd have to back up board member
Chris
on this. I'd have to say, because I've been struggling with the same thing, and it's not that there's been a lot of communication, but I think there's a continuity has been a little hard for me to follow. And I was looking during this call. I know I dropped off for a period. I actually joined on the other Zoom. I had to do it through my phone while my computer sadly decided to reboot during this call. Nothing like getting the blue sad face on your PC during the middle of an important call, but I was continuously listening and participating. That being said, I am struggling to keep up to feel like I'm making substantive input or informed input. And so I take the role pretty seriously, but I don't feel like I've got enough core knowledge to understand how these changes are really impacting. I almost go to the point of wanting to know, are we operating at the right level, getting into the granularity of understanding these language changes and some of the subtleties? Some of them are policy based, some of them are actually just procedural based. And so I don't know what altitude we're to be operating at, and I can't actually speak to the specificity of some of the things that you've shared. So I'm pretty much in the same camp Ben is in.
Okay.
I'm
Paula,
the
you're
same
on.
way too.
Oh,
Uh,
Juanita, okay. Anyone?
I was gonna say, I think, I mean, I actually think it's just really hard because we're seeing this document outside of the plan. Like I continuously, I'm like, okay, so goal 2, and then I have to look at the physical plan that I have in front of me to be like, oh, this was goal 2. But I also, I mean, and I don't think that this is, I don't mean this to be like shady at all. And I hope that no one takes it like this, but like, I don't think this is the right group to be voting on this, on these like substantive things. I mean, and not to say that this isn't the wrong group. Maybe this could be like a some kind of like town hall or something. Well, I don't know if town hall is it. Maybe like a focus group. Just because I feel like you know, we have members on this committee that have lived experience. We have members of this committee that have like actually worked on the ground and like worked in some of these services. But I find that we're continuously going back to be like, well, can we explain what this one thing is? And I think a lot of them are technical, like, can we define this in the report versus not? But then we as a board don't have that foundational piece to be like, we're voting on, should we define it in the report when most of this board doesn't know what it is in the first place? And I'm happy that we're doing this. I think this is important for us to do this, but like I hate this terminology, like, what is it, like building the plane while we fly it, something along those lines. We don't have that, a lot of us don't have that foundational piece to vote on these things. So which worries me a little bit. Actually a lot. It worries me a lot, actually.
Well,
So if I
okay.
can
And
offer being,
I guess,
Simha, why don't you go? And
Okay.
yeah, and then we'll circle back.
I think, I guess the way that I look at this is that as a body, like as a full group of 13, I think we actually do bring a tremendous amount of expertise here, right? As Christopher said, like, I'm not the person to talk to about, whether wage equity increases and like the rate of wage increase and the overall impact on our, community is. But I am the guy to talk to about like, hey, how does medical respite play a role? And I also think that, like each of us brings a different area of expertise to this. I think that input is incredibly helpful in the places that we have our own particular knowledge base. And then also, as just generally informed and thoughtful people, being able to point to questions like, oh, this doesn't really make sense. Can you walk us through it, right? Like it was for me today, hearing more about the severe weather shelter response was actually really helpful, because transitioning from severe weather event to like seasonal severe weather shelter is a pretty big change and makes a ton of sense to me. I just needed to know about it and hear about it and like think through the implications. I guess as a body, I actually do have a lot of faith in us to be able to provide substantive feedback. Maybe not on everything for every individual, but as a group, I'm hopeful.
I want to say that, Simha, I actually don't disagree with you. I'm not saying that like we don't have the know-it-all to like do it, but I just think this is too granular, and I think this gets to, I would say, a little bit of the split amongst people who've read the report. Like some people are like, it's not granular, like it's too high level. I think this is too in the weeds, and we will continue to go back and forth on like, well, what is it, and like how should we do it? Where I would actually prefer, and I know that this probably will not be a popular opinion, I would actually just like prefer that we just have a suite of things like, hey, we're gonna really focus on definitions here and like the things that are more substantial. I like technical revisions. I don't think we need to do that. Me personally, I feel like that is getting too in the weeds, and that's what RHA staff are for. I would rather that we focus on the substantial like policy and like program changes.
Okay, Chris, you were, oh, go ahead, Chris, you were going to say something? And then I'll get a word in here as well.
I agree with Paula's summation. I share Simha's optimism and positivity. I also am empathetic to how much work Alexis and her team puts into trying to make this comprehensive and informative. It's just, I do actually lean into Paula's comments more. We're a smart body of individuals, but I don't think we're the right body of individuals to be making those kind of granular copy edits, copy changes, program changes. I think we should be operating at a more of a governance level, and I think we should be up leveling this a little bit. I don't have an elegant answer to how Alexis and team, though, should be trying to piece together. I mean, this is a square peg trying to go in a round hole. You have a governance board, or you have an implementation board that needs to get involved and informed, and we're trying to go through the plan. I think that the actions are appreciated, but I don't know if this is the right approach. So we're close. I don't want to feel like it's futile, and I don't want to disparage any of our intellect or ability to do this or the positivity that Seema was trying to bring. I agree. It's too granular. It's not in the right swim lane for the capacity and the contributions that each of these board members bring. And I'm speaking for myself because, I mean, even you, John, I know you come with a vast background and experience, and maybe you're more comfortable in this than we are.
I might be more comfortable in the process, but I think this is actually something that comes up in a lot of processes, especially with unique boards. And this is, I think we have great talent on this board. And I'll just give you an example today. The issue over congregate care or not congregate care and what happens in the shelter and safety and those sorts of things, I believe aren't a result of having certain number of people in beds in one single room, but rather an operational issue to meet people's needs. And I heard today from, I'm sorry, from Okisha, it was really good to hear what those operational issues are that keep people from, let people choose going back out into the cold and rain rather than being there. But it also sort of buoys my my concept that we can make these operational changes. Not perfect, but that we can make them. I do think that some of these get so far into the weeds that it is really difficult for us to be saying that. I'd rather us stay at, as was said, the governance level here. I'll give you an example of one. There was one in here that said, it said something about if the funds are available, and it said, take that prepositional phrase out. Well, I can't make a decision on that unless I see how that change of prepositional phrase really drives the issue. I do think there were some very good comment today at sort of that higher level or medium level about, you know, about the issue of severe weather shelter and how and they kind of tie in with, can we come up with ways that provide best practices and good practices to organizations that are offering that shelter? I'll just speak from my own experience in Bellevue. We went from severe weather to being able to have people in shelter from like November. There'd be a big debate. Would it be November 22nd or November 15th? And how much could you afford? And did it go to March? And then we began to extend it. And then we realized one of the worst things we were doing was on May 1, shutting the shelter down. And anything that had happened over that winter among the men in that shelter was lost. And they then felt abandoned again. But so the next thing we did was go full-time or close to full-time. And so and I'd love to see that sort of experience bring some of these shelters into more full-time. And I think that it is often, and it didn't come easily, I will say that, but so I like that. I think finding a way that we can make a system that deals with individuals fleeing domestic violence in this side of the system and individuals getting support on this side of the system, and meld those in so that support that's not directly related to domestic violence gets to both. I mean, that just, to me, makes sense. I agree with a lot of you on the issue of it's a little bit out of even the KCRHA's ability to take on a massive socioeconomic issue in terms of wages. We should make sure there's not wage disparity among classes of individuals, men, women, that I just, I think taking that issue on is just so difficult, but it needs to be taken on. So those are just a couple of comments that I would have. And again, I've kind of looked at this group trying to reach some consensus for staff so that they feel like they have a reason to go ahead and propose these changes. I'll stop there.
Sean, do you think that maybe a way that we could move forward here is to maybe between now and the next meeting, make a list of the issues that we think we would like to tackle in this subcommittee regarding the plan, and then the issues that we're comfortable with the staff going and coming up with their recommendation that we can look at en masse, because I think that just in this meeting, there are a few topics that have risen to where I think there's need for debate. In the last meeting, there also were some topics that rose to that level, like the broad question of, are we building a plan that is aspirational in scope, or one that we know we can get funded? Like that's a really big decision that we have to make.
Yes.
So if we can come up with that like list of, I don't know, 5 or 6 topics, and then we can then engage on those, that might allow us to focus our discussion on those things that would then allow for the professionals to do the real work of revising the plan.
Well, I do think we will need to get that input from governing board members, staff, the staffs working together to figure out what the governing board would want on some of the issues that are important to many of us. Again, structure of the plan, how do you lay out the funding options, where is the funding coming from? But I do think a lot of what we talked about today got pretty deep. Having said that, I learned, and I think that that in and of itself, for me, makes it a success. Are there areas that we see here that we could let staff know that, yeah, we feel pretty comfortable at least a moderate level of, like what I talked about on severe weather, and a couple of other topics, and I really do apologize for missing about 15 to 20 minutes of the meeting. But
John, before you proceed,
yeah, Chris.
His hand up.
I'm sorry.
I don't know if that's a carryover from previous comment, but
there you are. Simha, yeah. Go ahead.
I think it's a really helpful discussion, and I think it actually helped me sort of reflect even on my participation in this particular meeting. Because I realized a couple things. Number one, I'm actually one of those guys who really loves the details. Like hearing more about details is exciting for me. It helps me feel more confident and understand things better. But that's just me. And they're right. Like there is a level that we actually should if we wade into, we'll actually maybe just muck things up a bit. So like the example around diversion and prevention from my perspective, at least, like I can't comment well on that, but I really wanted to know more about it. Truth is, like, though that sort of level of technical discussion of like, hey, we want to adjust the definitions of prevention and diversion, like I think I like to know that it's happening, and like they received provider feedback or whatever, and this prompted this revision. Knowing that that's happening is great. And I'd like to just, maybe we should have done is like, oh, great, thanks for letting us know, moving on. And really focusing in on the substantive policy pieces or like large changes. As an example, like one of the things that staff pulled out for us as like something really important for us to weigh in on next week is Medicaid and foundational community support. And like that is huge because that is a major policy piece that directly impacts our ability, like the possibility of funding and like growing our funding. And so we need to like know that piece well and be able to comment on it when they come to us and talk about it. So I guess what I'm saying is I really like this revision memo because it really pulled together a tremendous amount of feedback and then highlighted like the big changes. And I think the thing that we could do is really just go off the format that we have, but choose to gloss over the smaller stuff and not get in the weeds and really focus on things that are important. But including like, making sure that we understand that the structure of the plan, for example, is a good solid one. So that's it. I'll stop there.
Yeah, and Simha, I couldn't talk about what the policy implications are on the Medicaid or the foundational community support because I don't know anything about them. And so I'd like to learn more about that. And what I'd like to know is why weren't we getting them in the first place? And that may answer the question, well, if you get that funding, you're not eligible for this funding. Then that's a real serious policy issue to call. It may be, no, it doesn't have any effect and we should go for it. But I will tell you, I'm absolutely clueless about that, other than it was difficult to get on Medicare. Others.
I put it in the chat. I mean, and this is just like a recommendation. So Alexis, how much of these listed things would you say are revisions, like technical revisions? Like what percentage?
That's a good question. Probably a solid, I would guess 60%, and looking at Abby as she might have the tracker up.
That was exactly what I would have guessed.
Yeah, I was looking at that too. And I just wonder, because I think to Simha's point, like I think it's important for us to like have some ability, like have some way of like knowing what is happening, but not get in the weeds. And I'm just wondering if we could, between this meeting and the next, just kind of like look through them and flag the ones that we have questions about. And then otherwise just like accept the suite that we don't.
Well, and I would say also, Paula, if there is something that's listed as a technical amendment and somebody looks at it and says, whoa, that potentially has a big impact, to be able to flag that and just ask staff, right?
Yeah, well, that's exactly what I said.
Okay.
Flag the ones that we think are like, that we have questions or might have like a bigger impact, and then just kind of like give the thumbs up on the rest that we don't.
Yeah. And as Ben said, add in like those pieces that, hey, I really expected this piece. Can we make sure to talk about it?
Yeah. And I'll give you one there. I like that there was some reference to working with the faith communities, and I think it was in the severe weather, but there are so many other ways to work with faith communities. And so I don't know what else is coming from that. So that would be an area that I'd flag.
And happy to share, we did expand on faith-based strategy in a few areas of the plan per feedback from Pastor Anderson.
Oh, perfect. Okay.
Yeah, I think
go ahead.
Abby put in there, 56 of 78 are technical revisions. I feel like if we can like actually commit to going through this in the next week and just like approving the ones that we don't have questions on, we can have like such a more substantial conversations about some of the meatier pieces of this of the recommendations.
I do want to caution people that this is a committee of the whole, but we don't have the whole committee here. We've had, less, so there may very well be, and at any given time, I think any board member later on in the process can bring up an issue and say, wait, I want to flag that and have and discuss it, because we're not a final determiner here. I just always like to remind people.
Well, then I would tell them that they should be here.
Well, they should, but this is so. And my experience has been, you can see a committee of the whole vote one way, and 1 week later, they vote a completely different way, and they were all there.
So I think, I mean, firstly, I'm much more excited about the strategic and structural issues. I truly believe that's where we need to focus our time. It is, I struggle with approving a technical change to a document where I didn't approve or write the initial draft in the first place. So I'm not sure what I add there. If there's a feeling that this committee needs to approve those issues, I think it would be very helpful to frame them in a way that allows us to understand it. Sort of here's how the world works today. Here's what was proposed in the original draft, and here is what we are proposing in the new draft, so that we can see what the actual choice that's being made is. But that said, I would be quite comfortable just deferring all of it, at least until after the strategic and structural issues are addressed to our satisfaction.
So for next week, so I think, Alexis, you said closer to the meeting of the 23rd, we might have a little bit more on the structural and whatnot. But if meetings continue with the governing board members, staff, be great to get an update on that next week and what they're talking about. Do they have, because I think this is such an important element that it's got to be set up for the governing board members to be in a format that they are expecting to get this approved by a 2/3 vote of the governing board. So, I want to make sure, not that I want to defer to them necessarily. I'm saying, because I think that way maybe we can get a little more, we as the implementation board can get more of our impact into those, as Ben is saying. And it's actually been one of my issues all along.
John, may I,
Yes, Emma.
From Ben's comment, sorry, it's very loud here. One thing that comes to mind is, like, I think one of the issues is that we're sort of starting small and moving towards big revisions, right? Like, severe weather is important, but it's not that big and structural. And then we move to Medicaid FCS, which I think actually is really big, and I'm super excited to talk about it. But it's a funding strategy for the third piece, which is like for the third week out, which is, hey, here's what we can do at different funding levels, which I think is sort of the strategic level that Ben was talking about. And so I think it feels hard to go from small to big, when I think we would, having the big framework and then getting more narrow may be helpful. But it may be that they're still working on those revisions and they're not quite at a stage where they can be, fully presented yet.
John, can I make a suggestion? I know we only have 3 minutes left. Alexis has heard a lot of input. Maybe we give the last word to Alexis, what she thinks she can do and is sustainable with all this information.
And in the little time that we do have left, is there anything we can help you with? Or
We've helped enough.
Well, appreciate that board member Ross giving me a couple minutes to kind of wrap us up and get clear on next steps. So first of all, just want to thank the board for giving some really clear direction to us. I think we always want to err on the side of being transparent about, especially with something as big as this, and being transparent on what's the universe of changes that we're looking at. So definitely appreciate the feedback and redirecting us on what kind of changes we should be bringing forward to you all. We do have Medicaid foundational community supports slated for next week, and we've been working with a firm known as CSH, so Corporation for Supportive Housing, who are national leaders, and they were expecting to come speak and talk about specifically what that payment reform strategy would look like. And since that is such a transformational kind of piece, I imagine we could keep that meeting slated as is, but just do a really deep dive focus on what all the implications of that strategy change. The only other changes were included in that session are there's an additional strategy for youth and young adults to consider around direct cash transfers, but we could probably spend a lot of time talking through FCS youth young adult strategy, maybe circle back on some of these pieces. We do need to work as staff around some of the structural elements, and so still wanting to keep that on schedule, but we'll be working next week and can provide an update on that point. But definitely receiving the feedback that it sounds like dialing back from the technical revisions, would love if folks could take a review and just note if there's anything really that's giving folks heartburn and where there might be challenges, but can pivot in our strategy and what we're bringing forward to this board. But likely we'll keep FCS as the topic for next week because we do have speakers. With that, I'm seeing nods, so I think that's okay.
Can you share what it is for the actual document? I'm getting a little document crazy with versions. So is there a fresh, can you maybe reset what we're reviewing?
Absolutely.
And I may be the only one, so forgive me.
Not a problem. So it actually would be helpful. I know we've already gotten feedback on the matrix of changes. And so I'd like to send a updated version that is the version for you all to be considering and looking at tomorrow, because there were a couple of tweaks. And so you all will get a version tomorrow on the proposed revision matrix and be able to sort through and see technical revisions versus substantive policy matters.
And I think if, as Paula said, we can share with you individually areas where we just say, you know, that we don't need to spend time on this particular technical provision, I think that would be helpful. And if you start seeing, if you see a back and forth where half of us want to spend time and half of us don't, then we probably need to spend time on it.
Absolutely happy to do that work.
Okay.
And thank you all for your engagement on this. Is that a cat, Juanita? Sorry.
Good. That's a great way to end the meeting, Juanita. Can't go wrong that way. Is there anything else to come before us? Anything that people want to say before we adjourn? Any objection to adjourning?
No, I just want to say thank you, Alexis, for your excellent work and everyone. And even though I just came in and not kind of really knowing and catching up, but just to share lived experience and being a DV survivor in that system, I was told a couple years ago they couldn't help me with my rent, and that was during the pandemic, and because there's not enough funding. And so just being mindful that in these circumstances it is life and death, and to removing barriers is life-saving. So I just want to say thank you for hearing me.
But that is a very important message, and we appreciate hearing it from you, Juanita. Anybody else have anything to say? Any objection to adjournment? Okay, we are adjourned. Thank you all for your hard work today. Thank you, staff, for everything that you're doing for us and walking us through this, and trying to make it work well for us and make it work well for you and for the people who we serve. Thank you. Okay. Have a great evening, everyone.
Take care.